name is Kimberly LaGreca. My title is Energy Education Specialist, and I work for the Society of Petroleum Engineers. My university, I did both my bachelor's and my master's at the University of New York at Buffalo. And I have been in my current position for just over 2 years.
What does an energy educational specialist do and kind of a day in a life of your job?
So my position is quite unique. I basically day to day I have a lot of smaller things that I do, such as processing the free book orders for teachers, a lot of email correspondence back and forth with logistics for events, or inquiries that we get from teachers, inquiries we get from our SPE members. So these are engineers all across the world that maybe want to do classroom presentations or somehow they want to volunteer with our program. So I do a lot of day-to-day communications, but my main focus is planning and teaching professional developments for K through 12 teachers about the oil and gas industry.
So, how long has a job like this been there? Did they create it and you stepped in, or did you replace somebody else?
I replaced a previous employee. This position was created around 2006. The program was much smaller back then, one, maybe two events a year. Now there's three of us. Two of us are here in the Houston office and one in our Dubai office. And we have workshops all over the world. I think this year we had over 20 events.
So, how did the engineers, because I think you said that you also did some training with the engineers and stuff, how do they respond to, getting teachers on board and helping facilitate some of, their future? I mean, in essence, the people that they'll work with.
We get great response back from the engineers, our local members. They're really excited about the program. A lot of them like going into schools, especially the young professionals, that group that's 35 and under. Mm-hmm. They love going back to their old high school, or, working with the college kids and going back to schools to have presentations. The biggest thing we train engineers on is how to talk to students, not being too technical, not using too many acronyms, and just knowing their audience.
So, do you spend most of your day in the office or out and about doing things?
Yeah, for the majority of the days, I'm in the office. So, in between events, most of my time is spent here. But events, those could run anywhere from 3 to 7 days, depending on where we're going.
So, what degrees in specific do you have that you got from Buffalo?
I have a bachelor's degree of geological sciences, mm-hmm. and a master's degree of education. So previously, I was a high school earth science and environmental teacher. Mm-hmm. I had my teaching certification in New York. And then when we moved to Texas, I was really looking for a job I could use the degrees I have. But there was something outside of the classroom, and I just happened upon this quite unique position.
So what training and experience did you need to kind of have this job? I mean, obviously you worked as a teacher, so you kind of had the teaching aspect of it down, I would expect.
Mm-hmm. My prior classroom experience, I think, was the number one reason why I was qualified for this job. Before coming to SPE, I worked at the Children's Museum of Houston as their science educator. Mm-hmm. And there I learned things like budgeting, project management, a lot of public speaking. So I think, teaching is all public speaking, but speaking to different audiences. I worked with a collaboration of museums on a nanotechnology project. So I was speaking to different groups, and I think that job really lent me the tools outside of the classroom that I needed to be successful, because it is a lot different. It's a lot more of an office setting, a lot more logistics. So both, I think, classroom and then the museum, those two experiences really gave me what I needed to be successful here.
Is there anything in particular that you found going into that degree that you were like, man, I wish I would have done that, that would have helped in this aspect of it?
Part of my job is public relations. So a lot of times we're going into areas that are, like in Texas, most people are familiar with the oil and gas industry. But when we go into other areas that aren't as familiar with it, we get some resistance. So that public relations aspect of, making sure that you're you're saying the right thing, you're wording things correctly, you're not using anything that's going to fire somebody up,
Right.
or just that PR side. Training in that would be really beneficial in this area.
So, would you consider that one of your most challenging parts of your job, as far as some of the PR side of it and the resistance, or is there something else?
Yeah, no, I would say that is part of the hardest thing, because when you go into certain areas, you just don't know what the response is going to be. At NSTA in Chicago,
Hmm.
we had somebody come by that had to be removed from the convention because they were like picketing our booth. Yeah, so I think it's more just understanding, how people get their information, and knowing that it's not always correct, and then how to approach that.
So, what would you consider the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, the workshops, teaching.
What are some of the resources and software that you use in your job?
We use, I mean, your day to day computer
Hmm.
programming, a lot of PowerPoints, Publisher and such. We have a special program called ACT, which is our database, and I'm in charge of keeping that. We keep all our teacher contacts, so when we do workshops in a certain region, we can pull those contacts. We can keep track of what workshops people attended, if we've sent them a free book. So that's a specialized program we use. And
Okay.
then I've also learned a little bit of WordPress to do some of the back end stuff of our website, as far as putting up a blog post, or I know, a quick edit or something like that. My colleague does most of the website stuff, but I did learn a little bit of WordPress, which was new for me when I got here. So that was exciting.
Do you consider your job post maybe going away at any point, or do you see it only getting stronger from this point?
Our board and our CEO have a lot of faith, and they really love our program. To be honest, we just went through a round of layoffs because the oil and gas industry is in
Right.
a downward turn right now. So, that is something that kind of crosses our mind, because if the oil and gas industry is down, people are not going to buy memberships to our organization, and we'll be forced to make cuts. But they see the value in education, especially at the level we're doing it, K through 12. So while it is something that's in the back of my mind, it's not something I dwell on.
Right. So that kind of explains, the trends that you see happening just in your job in general. Um, do you think that there'll just be more and more and more chances to outreach to other people, or do you see it kind of changing a little bit where it's more online video to video instead of face to face or anything like that?
We are looking to do some more online stuff, as far as some short courses, but those are going to be geared more towards our members. How to give a classroom presentation, how to do a workshop with your local teachers. As far as the workshops we do for teachers and students, I see those continuing to be, us facilitating them in person, because the majority of our workshops are done at a big oil and gas conference. So the kids and the teachers get to see the technology, they get to meet with the individuals that work in the industry. And that part of our program is so unique. And I think it's kind of what separates us from a regular workshop. So I see that continuing.
That's interesting. So with that, with doing the videos to other people, what do you see changing in the next 5 to 10 years in your job position?
I I see our positions increasing. Right now, like I said, there's three of us, and we are almost at the limits of what three people can do. So I can see our positions becoming more specialized, and adding a few. So some of us are more workshop focused, some of us would be more curriculum focused, and then potentially the logistics side of it. So I see it expanding and then specializing.
Okay, so in our educational technology, our graduate students, is there any information you would like to share with them in particular?
I took this class when I did my master's,
Okay.
and I remember, I mean, I was learning blogs and things. I was like, I've never done this before. Um, I think it's important that most of your students probably know, at least I found most of my students had better grasp of technology than I did. So I really took this class to learn as much as I could and really apply it to my classroom. But with that being said, there is no substitution for great teacher that has detailed plans, and just the delivery of a lesson can't be replaced by technology alone. So, well, I think it's important, and it absolutely should be incorporated in the classrooms. Um, I don't know, just as a teacher, I hold on to that little bit of, I mean, public speaking. You're modeling that for students, and that's going to be something so important for them in their future. Those soft skills that they're going to need to get a job, to go on an interview, to hold an actual conversation that isn't emojis and LOLs.
Yes,
So,
I can agree with that.
yeah, I think seeing someone talking to them every day is important.
So, and then the other side of our graduate work is like the instructional design, like learning theories and things like that. How do you incorporate that into your job whenever you're, talking to engineers or other teachers? I mean, one of the things you did for us in the CAS convention is you put it hands on because that's why we did the lab. So obviously that's part of all that. So when you're designing those instructions, because you talked about reworking some of those lab pages and things like
Yep.
that. How does that fit into knowledge on what it should look like to be able to be easily done?
A lot of our instructional design that when we tinker with it, is really going back to feedback that we get from teachers, or when Jenny and I sit down and do these activities and just think of easier, better ways that they're going to be understood. And kids that learn different ways. I was never an essay writer. I was not great at tests that were just essays, but I could draw you a picture, I could diagram things, I could explain it. So I think, definitely looking at different ways that we can add to our lessons, whether it be a supplemental diagram. Maybe not all the students need it, but it would be great to have. One thing I did at the museum would be, because we have a lot of visitors that were not, English was not their first language, and my programming would be out without an instructor. So I did a lot of photographs of step-by-step pictures of what it should look like in each phase, and I think that's something we could potentially add. And our director just did a workshop in Russia, and so you have this language barrier,
Yeah.
and those are things you have to think of how you can overcome, and those are things we're always thinking about.
That's excellent. Well, I think I've gone through all of the questions that I have on the page. Is there anything else that you might like to add or anything in general, or do you feel like we've kind of covered it all? I kind of feel like we have, but
Yeah, I just I think when people get their degrees, thinking outside the box of what you can do is important. So I hope people hear kind of my background and where I started, and how I worked my way over to SPE is, gets maybe some other people thinking that, I'm not, maybe I don't like this job, but this is the degree I have. Well, you can always expand your skill set and find something else.
well, I appreciate you very much doing the interview, and I have learned a lot just visiting with you, and I've really enjoyed being around you and hearing about your job, and it certainly inspires me not only in the classroom to do some different things and how I can challenge my students, but in the future, some different things that are out there that can definitely open some doors for some, especially the ones that'll be watching this video as they go through thinking, why am I doing this master's right now? I think there's a
Yep.
lot of doors that can be opened up in the future, getting to talk to people like you in the industry, not just in our education pods, but there are jobs out there for
Right.
educational technologists and instructional design type people just in the
Absolutely.
industry itself. So, well,
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Kim. Thank you so
You
much
are
for doing the
very
interview.
welcome.